Oh, it's finally over, and I think I'm relieved, if anything, I feel like. Hello, everybody, and welcome to an ETTO spoiler cast, all on the first season of Loki.
What a start.
I'm Will. Next to me is...
Sam.
You have to do Brady Bunch. You have to point down now.
And then under me is...
Ben. And then to the left... Right.
It's Josh.
Left of me is Josh.
Back to Will.
And I'm Will. And we're all here to talk about this show. We have, like, varying degrees of Marvel, of TV knowledge, and I felt like this is, like, the show that we should all come together, because I think of the three MCU shows so far, this is probably the most divisive.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's no middle ground on this show, I feel like. No. You either loved everything they did, or you thought it was the worst thing they did since Dark World, quote William Yates 2 weeks ago. I guess it's not even worth doing spoiler-free, because this is we're talking about the whole show, but maybe just at a glance. Sam, we did like an episode on the very first one, and we were kind of like, oh, that was okay. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Now that the show's finished, how are you feeling?
Look, like... Still okay. There's issues that I have that maybe aren't necessarily like issues that other people have. I think for me, just with like the Marvel series in general, like with all of them so far, it's been a kind of like thing for me where they haven't really hit or miss. I've just sort of been like on the fence. Like I've enjoyed moments, but when I look at the series as a whole, I'm like, it was okay. Could have been a bit better. And
there is a middle ground.
You know. Yeah, apparently it's me. It's just me. So I think Loki especially puts me in that middle ground, Josh, that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
What about you, Josh? How are you feeling?
I liked it to start. The first couple of episodes, I found it pretty interesting. I liked the mystery. I was intrigued by kind of the ideas that they brought up, and like, what is the TVA? Is it real? Blah blah blah. The middle just like sunk. It was just I don't know. It was just weird. Nothing happened. And then I really liked the last two episodes. I thought they were the strongest two episodes of the series for sure. So it was kind of like, you know, middling, then down, and then straight back up again.
Okay, back up.
So it was a weird roller coaster, from my opinion.
Yeah.
And Ben, you've kind of like you've clung to hope for a lot of this show, I feel like.
Yeah. I'd say I'm 70% loved it, 30% there was some really questionable decisions that were basically like 70% really high, 30% really low. So I also am kind of the middle ground. I think overall I enjoyed it, but like I also agree that there's some very weird things in this show.
Yeah, sort of strange decisions.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like this is an interesting one because I watched them all once, and the way that it happened is the same thing that happened with WandaVision as well. I then watch them again with like the parents. Mum gave up on episode 1. I'm watching it with Dad now. And I bulk watched episodes 3, 4, and 5 together, and I loved them. And so I'll flat out say I hated this final episode. I thought it was not brilliant, but I'm wondering, this may be the one series that I've ever experienced where I went, yeah, you could have just dropped it all at once. Like, and I actually think the more these series come out, the more I'm like, well, I think that the problem is they're not trying to tell a television story. They're still telling a Marvel movie story where it's like, it's never going to go beyond the bounds that they're setting up. It happened with WandaVision where it was like, oh, it's going to go over here. It's like, no, it was always going to be just this one contained thing. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it was always just these characters. And it happened again with this where everyone was kind of expecting it to blow up. And technically it did. But it still, in the end, kind of feels like a contained Marvel movie that you kind of can just watch at once. And I think, for me, I'm worrying these MCU shows, I think, aren't living up to a weekly drop because people are just blowing up on the internet and theorizing, which is the reason I didn't do this. I didn't bring you together every week because I was like, I'm going to ruin the show if we do that because we're just going to hope for something that didn't happen.
Yeah, it's definitely not kind of following the kind of like super intriguing like I don't know, television formula that the CW, like Arrowverse shows.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
kind of
The
have,
Boys as well is like a show where week to week, it's like, what's going to happen next week? And something does happen in the following week that you go, holy shit, that is actually a big thing. Whereas this is like, you've just split up a 6-hour movie. And so it just feels like I'm waiting for the next part of a movie rather than waiting for a continuing show.
Even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was like better at doing that. And like, obviously, within Marvel themselves, there's a bit of conjecture about how good that was for the MCU as a whole. But I think as a whole, in terms of like setting up stuff within a TV show context, but still like connecting things, that worked really well.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah.
And like in Marvel in general as well, like your Daredevil and stuff functioned, I think, better as a TV show than these are at the moment, at least.
Yeah.
But I guess, speaking of things that have divided the fan base, I think the first thing that we should probably talk about is not, I mean, maybe we should talk about the character of Sylvie first, rather than where that character goes. How do you think she was handled? Because for me, a lot of the acting in the show is really interesting because it feels like a lot of people are in a different show. Like they're in the one scene, but Hiddleston's like performing at like a different level than Owen Wilson, which that one is the one kind of back and forth that works because it's like they work with each other. But Hiddleston and Sylvie, I don't know, there's something that never quite clicked for me with their performances where I could never connect the two characters together. But yeah, how did everyone feel about our first, like, not Tom Hiddleston Loki?
I mean, I thought it was fine. Like, because we kind of, like, thought, like, well, we had ideas anyway that she might show up in this show. Like, yeah, for the most part, I thought she was fine. The one thing I wish there was more of with her, I feel like being a female version of Loki is obviously a big deal for like the fan base, just in general, just something cool to see. I feel like maybe she should have had more of like an impact, like just more like moments that when you look back on, you're like, oh yeah, that was sick. But when you sort of like when I look back on her character now, I'm like, I just remember all the talking. Because it's like, that's all this series was for me. It's a lot of talking.
Very dialogue-heavy show.
Yeah, pretty much. And that was like one of my main issues with this final episode. But I mean, that we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, if anything, I just felt like maybe she could have been a bit more impactful. But like, as far as like the actress goes, obviously she's just done the best with what she was given, and I thought she was really cool. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but I totally understand where you're coming from, Will, when you said like they seem to be on different levels, because like Tom's obviously at like an MCU level, like, you know, one of the biggest, well, the biggest film franchise in history. And then Sylvie comes in, and like we've compared a couple of these episodes, it feels like Doctor Who. So it feels like totally. Like a Doctor Who level actor or actress, whatever, coming in to like the MCU and trying to match that, and it's just there is something like a little flat about her character, and I found the other Lokis a little bit off as well. The kid Loki, I didn't like him at all. I thought he was one of the weakest Lokis in the whole thing. I'm sorry, but he felt like a Doctor Who child actor to me.
Like, I guess the big thing with Sylvie as well is that, you know, Ben, I'm sure you can speak on this as well. Yeah. The female Loki of the comics, at least the one you kind of envision, which is the Sif Loki, the one where Loki's inhabited Sif's body, it's still like a very maniacal, evil Loki, which is really interesting. Whereas this is like another Tom Hiddleston, so it wasn't an interesting dynamic. It was just same
I don't even think it's another Tom Hiddleston. I have some problems with this character.
Okay, please. Please.
So, for one, just from a queer representation standpoint, they set it all up that this is a gender fluid Loki. It's very exciting. We're doing all this. And then they proceed to put a female Loki and make it a heterosexual relationship with another Loki, which is the least... They don't deserve any credit for it. They mention that they're bisexual, but then they don't go into it at all, and they just have a normal, boring, no chemistry relationship. We'll get into that later. But I think I think the actress is good, but I think the writing for her character is pretty horrible and uninteresting. I think I think my issue is she isn't written like a Loki. Tom Hiddleston, well, maybe it's in her performance, but I feel like the writing really lets her down, in that she doesn't feel like she's mischievous at all. Doesn't feel like she's like scheming at all. She feels like a jaded Loki, which I guess is what they're going for, but there's not. It doesn't have the hallmarks of a Loki character for me. Even when they bring in the other Lokis in later episodes, each of them, you can tell in their own different quirkiness, is a Loki. Even the freaking alligator. And for me, I think my problem with her is that she never felt like a Loki. And I think they do that so well in the comics as well. I'm surprised that I don't know what went wrong with it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you there. And in that, like, the idea that, she doesn't feel too mischievous, her turn at the end is very strange.
Yeah.
Because at no point in the series did she feel like a Loki that would backstab, or, she's so reserved. It's only in that final episode that she just erupt with this, like, bizarre rage. I mean, I guess she has that moment in episode 3 where she just kind of screams, but that's more like frustration.
Yeah.
So, that's why that kind of twist at the end of all this didn't quite play well for me either. But we touched on it for a moment there. We might as well talk about the relationship, which is, for me, this show's worst point. And look, there is an insane amount of takes on this, and all of them could be correct. All of them can be right in your own view. Like, I saw one today, which was, as a race of people, there is no moral law of like having sex with yourself, because it can't happen. So it's not like, it's like you can't actually flat out say that this is a wrong decision and it's like immoral, because there's no founding in that. But the reason that I think for me it feels immoral is that they play them as siblings. They never feel like they're playing the same person across time. Like, if you had two Hiddlestons wanting to fuck each other, sure, like there's something in that. But it's the fact that it is a heterosexual relationship, and it goes beyond ever feeling like a study of Loki as himself. It could have. Like, it really had potential, but like beyond that beyond episode 3, it just careens into being like, we just want to have a relationship.
I think so initially Will and I were like at odds very much with this, where Will was like, I hate it, I think it's gross, and I was like, I just don't see it, because I just, like, it was what Will said, where there's no rules for it. So I was like, I don't actually feel anything objectively wrong with this. And then over the course of the rest of the show, as they did more stuff with their relationship, I got worse and worse on it. I think it's for the reasons exactly that you mentioned, that they never feel like they're actually two Lokis. Like they like, so their relationship doesn't feel like it's someone loving themselves. It's someone loving someone vastly different. They also have no romantic chemistry, in my opinion. I thought they actually had quite good platonic chemistry, and I almost thought they were going to stick there when in episode 5 they have that conversation and they kind of just hit that note. But then they kiss. So.
Oh my god! Like, I wish I was filming my reaction to that. But like, the joy I had when there's like a moment of pause, and I can't remember whatever the line of dialogue it is. It's like, it's so blatantly like, we're not going to kiss now, and I was like, oh, thank God. And it was like, I looked up, and as I looked back down, they were kissing, and I was like, the fuck happened? How did we get here? But we will get there. How did you guys feel about the whole Loki relationship? The Sloki.
Well, like, for me, like, because Ben, what you said, where like they do feel so far from one another that then like sometimes they feel they aren't the same person. I was kind of in that boat. So there were moments where, as the show's going on, you do get hints of this like thing happening between them, and like there's tension, obviously. But because to me, Sylvie was so different from a Loki, I just like didn't even see it as like it being an odd thing. It was more people pointing it out to me and me being like, okay, that's fair. Mainly you, Will.
It's fair.
But
It's fair.
but I think it was just because even though she was meant to be a Loki, to me she was just so different that I didn't really see anything wrong with it. And like even towards the end, I like forgot. Oh yeah, that's right, they're the same person. But yeah,
There was an interesting video someone put out where they brought up the fact that at no point in the show do they reference Sylvie having a Thor, and that's purely so that you remove that there's any sort of idea of siblings, and that if she was like, I have a Thor, that's when you go, oh shit, no, this is fucked.
Yeah.
But that's Sam. You have watched the show as Kevin Feige, I think.
yeah, probably.
Yeah. What about you, Josh?
I think for me, like, I didn't know all that much about Enchantress to start with. So I did a bit of research, jumped on a few, Marvel wikis and stuff. And that, like, Sylvie is a human who gets powers through, like, Asgard sort of coming to Earth and something happening. And so the whole time, like, when she first got announced, I'm like, so she's not that female Loki that everyone was talking about.
Yeah.
But I thought that was going to be just a twist at some point where it's like she's not actually a Loki, she just has these powers and stuff, but
It's
they're just playing
it's
off
reverse like Luke and Leia, where it's like, oh, it's actually okay that we kissed. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So I was kind of in my head, even though I'm like, all right, maybe she is actually a Loki because they are harping on about it so much. I just, again, like Sam, I just never saw it. And like most of us, just never saw it because I'm like, in my head, I'm like, but she's Enchantress. That's a different character. Like, I think I was talking about something with you earlier this week about Black Widow. And I'm like, or one of the later movies. And I'm like, oh, they can just change stuff later because Marvel seem to like to do that in the MCU. Just twist something just a little bit just to make it not comic accurate. And I just hadn't registered that they could do that here. And in my head, I'm like, that is a different character. It's not. She's not a
And
Loki.
it is
in the comics. She's not a Loki. It's weird. So, but it also felt like, I guess, in saying that, I didn't see anything wrong with it because she felt like a different character. But it just like they didn't need it. They didn't need a romantic relationship.
So unnecessary
at all. Yeah. Like it didn't lead to anything important or interesting at all.
Totally. Well, it's like you look at the comparison of like WandaVision is about that. So cool. It needs to be in that show. Falcon and the Winter Soldier is about obviously Sam deciding who he is in all of that. And still in that they found a way to have romance, like having Bucky go on that one date. And that's it. That's all it needs to be. One moment in that show. And the one moment in this show was the characters on the train discussing, who are we? Like, what is our... And which is, I can't speak on it, but I feel like was a bit of a pandering scene in the sense of like, well, box checked. Let's move on.
Loki, we're bisexual. Cool. Now we're going to...
Look at our lights.
Yeah,
See?
exactly.
It's all for you.
I just... It's really disappointing, and as you said, it's unnecessary. And I think the biggest issue is that, as you guys mentioned, it just has no reason whatsoever to be in the show. It adds zero value.
Well, it had a reason, which would have been the exploration of his character.
Well,
of his
but they
didn't.
That reminds me what was actually in my head was that I read, I think it was after the second or the third episode when they introduced the idea of there being a romance between them. I read an article, I think Will linked it in the Discord, about what like their ideas behind having that relationship and like exploring that. And I was like, oh, cool, they're going to explore it. Okay, maybe it might actually be interesting exploring like the questions behind what a relationship with yourself would involve. The problem is they never even do that. Like it's just a regular trophy romantic relationship from any TV show or film. Yeah.
That's actually a very good point. Yeah, because like you'd think that in a show like this where it's the same person in a way falling in love with each other, you think that at some point they'd be like, wait, is this wrong? Like, can we do this?
Totally.
But they just there's nothing of that at all.
there's no line, but the line that they do continue to say is "we're the same." Like they continually acknowledge that they're the same person.
Totally.
And then keep doing the same thing. It's like,
And I feel like that's the only reason why they do fall in love with each other, because like the only thing they ever say is, "I understand how you're feeling."
yeah,
It's like, is that why you two have this like thing for each other, because you understand how the other one feels? But like even then it's like there's more to love than like, oh,
Yeah.
I know how you're feeling right now.
yeah.
Friends understand
Totally.
how someone else feels.
Yeah,
like
true.
You don't need to kiss
don't need to
each
put your
other.
tongue in there.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah, it would have been
fine.
so much more interesting if it was just like if they didn't even bother having the relationship part because
No.
of how weak it was
Yeah.
anyway, and they were just two friends just trying to help each other out by the end of
Yeah.
it. Like they were
Yeah.
sort of fighting
Holding
a little
hands.
bit, but not, and yeah, just hanging out. Like,
Yeah.
interesting thing that I think Mr. Sunday talked about in one of his videos about episode 5, where Tom Hiddleston Loki, like they're sitting next to each other on a hill, and he like gets a blanket because it's cold.
Yeah.
He's a frost giant.
They're both
That man
frost
does not get
giants.
cold.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're both, yeah.
Yeah.
Technically, they both should be if they're the same person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they don't get cold.
Which is
Damn it.
like there's some fun there where you can be like, oh, he did it just to get closer.
Yeah.
But because
Yeah.
she's actually cold, it's like, no, you did actually just forget. You entirely forgot.
Totally.
But I think we're settled.
Yeah.
It's a weird choice.
Yeah.
Some
Little
of us
bit.
can look past of us, some of us can't. For me, the
guess-
thing that kept coming into my brain was friggin', which I've warmed to over time, and I don't think I'm warming to this, is obviously Rise of Skywalker. Like, it gives me that Kylo Ren Rey vibe, where it's like,
Yeah,
you
okay.
either fully understand what's happening here and why they've made this choice, or you're that guy in the YouTube video that's like, fuck this, and like leaves the cinema. Like, you'll be on either side of the
Yeah.
camp, and like, if this spoke to you, cool, good on you. But it didn't quite work. For me, the other big thing of the show, which was a little bit disappointing, was how it was almost like the idea of time travel and multiverse and all those elements were just like a window dressing thing just to be able to pad out episodes. Like the first two really set up the TVA as an interesting organization. Like you see all the agents going out on missions and like having to purge things because something's gone wrong, and like Loki has the great scene in Pompeii where he discovered, like, there's so many interesting world-building setups for time travel. And then after episode 3, that's gone. We don't really go back to the TVA. We only go back to the TVA to recreate scenes from the first two episodes. That's all that happens.
I just want to bring up one thing that every now and then I remember it happened in this show, and then I'm like, why didn't they do anything with that? And it's the end of episode 2 when they first find Sylvie and she bombs the timeline. And then for the rest of the show they act like it didn't happen.
You know why? Because the end of the show is that moment.
Exactly.
Like, it's the same. Wait, or maybe that is what it is.
But it's
Maybe
like
the moment
so
at the end of the
delayed.
show. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, the moment at the end of the show is the timeline being bombed.
Yeah.
So it's like it comes back to bite him in the end there, but yeah, it's just it was really sad. The biggest sad, as the young people say, is how quickly Owen Wilson is sidelined in the show, because the relationship between him and Tom Hiddleston's Loki is the best thing this show has going.
Better romantic chemistry between those two
Mate,
than him and Sylvie.
The shriek I made when they hug in episode 5, I was so happy.
Yeah.
Good.
And even the exchange of him saying, "You're my favorite" to Sylvie, I'm like, this is the dynamic. This is it.
Yeah.
This is what the show could be built on. And then that's it. Like, he's gone he never interacts with the end of the show until obviously the big twist at the end. And yeah, like, it infuriates me because I feel like they do it all the time. Like, Bucky and Sam is the best thing that happened in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and they have some fun moments in the first 3 episodes, and then for the rest of it, like, Carly literally says, is he just there for window dressing? Because Bucky just kind of is chilling in the background.
Yeah.
Like, there's such a weird thing with these shows where they lose the focus of what it could be, and they just kind of, they divert very quickly. I feel like WandaVision had a similar thing where it could have focused a bit more down on Wanda and Vision. Oh yeah, Sword. That's what kind of broke that show
They didn't need
apart.
Sword at all in that show.
No.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like, how did everyone feel about the TVA as a thing, which is clearly not going away as well?
Well, like, for me, because, like, Will, when we've spoken about this, the TVA was the thing that got me the most excited about this show. Because being a fan of like TV shows where there is like time travel and like, I'm just a big fan of all that sort of stuff. So when
second to Superman.
yeah, of course. But yeah, so when they were brought into this like Marvel universe, I was like, this is sick, because like I'm not that well versed on the comics, so I didn't know what to expect from any of these shows. So whenever this comes up, I'm like, great. But yeah, I was like, this is great, because I loved the fact that they could go through time, they were fixing things. It was in every way kind of like a Time Lord, having to go through time in his box and fix things. So I was like, that's great. And like, that was the one thing that I love most about this show. And yeah, it was a bit sad that it just kind of got pushed to the side because the romance between Loki and Sylvie was more important.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What about you, Josh?
Like I said, I really liked, the first couple of episodes where they set up the TVA, found that super interesting. And yeah, all the discoveries they made along the way about it all, and how, Loki made discoveries about these cataclysmic events, or whatever they were called, in certain periods of time, like in Pompeii, that the TVA had never considered before and never seen.
Yeah.
And they were like, holy crap, like that was all super cool and super interesting stuff. And again, it's disappointing that it all just kind of got shafted, but I am definitely intrigued for season 2, as they kind of teased in the post credits, which is one of the first confirmations of a season 2 of any of these shows.
I like that. Literal. There's a literal stamp in the credits as well.
It's bloody happening. So I'm super keen for more of just that TVA. I hope they explore it more, and actually do more.
You don't want to see the cafeteria, the bookcases, and the office again?
Man, I don't know. I want them to do...
the one hallway.
I want them to do more interesting time travel stuff. More time things in the future. I'm intrigued to know when they're thinking of even having season 2.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Whether that's
Ben, I love watching.
Or...
I love going between me, then Sam, then Josh, because Ben just sits there stewing. It's like Ben's got something to say.
No, I just I love the aesthetic of the TVA, and they do such a good job of setting it up in those first couple episodes really consistently. Like the first 2 episodes especially, very much getting like these. It's kind of got 1984 aperture science, a bit of all that mixed in. It's like retro futuristic kind of technology, so it's really cool. It's like a nice aesthetic, a lot of like all the bold oranges and everything. Sets up really nicely, I think. And there's a reason why the entire credit sequences are basically shots from the TVA, because it's the best looking thing in the whole show. And I think it kind of, again, when they go away from it, every time they go away from it, it's kind of just like, whatever. I like it's I found like some of like I liked episode 5 a lot, but not because it was visually interesting, just because of what was going on. Whereas like those were the bits that were always like visually pulling me in the most. Totally. And then every time they went away from it, I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Like even Kang's super cool temple at the end just was kind of like, whatever.
We'll obviously get to him, but like for me, that whole aesthetic was what I would have liked Agatha's basement to be. Because Agatha's basement is just kind of like some cobwebs in an actual basement. It's like, okay, cool.
It's
like this is like a fucking castle.
It's like someone decorated their house for Halloween.
It was a leftover set from like the first season of Stranger Things or something. Like
I found it super interesting how much people have talked about the aesthetic of the TVA, and how much like the producers of the show have actually come out and talked about it specifically as well. That's been kind of cool, because a lot of what I've seen and heard is like that was a major choice, because that sort of look is I don't know, like known but timeless. Like you kind of you see it and you understand it, and it looks cool and interesting and retro but futuristic, like Ben said. But it's still kind of timeless, and no matter when you watch this show, when you come back to it, that will still be a cool look.
Totally.
No matter what, it won't kind of age and be like, ugh. Like the 2020s. Yuck.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, when even was that? Who knows?
Yeah, look.
It's like a timeless thing. They're outside of time themselves. So it's like, of course, they're going to have this weird, cool kind of aesthetic themselves, and the producers and creators of the show did a really good job with that. It's cool.
They did, and it's also like, I think the first ever bit of world building in the MCU. Like, the MCU who is solely, apart from obviously Guardians, I guess, and Thor's stuff, and Black Panther. But all, like, Black Panther especially, I think it's still very human and Earth-based, kind of in its looks. And obviously Guardians is very space-based, which is an aesthetic and a thing that we've kind of expect from a space movie. But this is the first time we've seen an environment in the MCU that isn't just earthy, and it is such an interesting place. And it's a place that, I feel like is going to become a bit of a hub for all the movies going forward. I hope we get more of this.
I feel like if you're building your entire storyline around time travel and multiversal stuff, using the TVA as a hub would very much be to their benefit, because otherwise people are going to get very confused.
Yeah. And like the beauty of the TVA is there is literally, at least in the comics, and they tease it in this by saying vampires and titans and stuff, like the TVA just houses, it could house any character the MCU wants to bring in. Like if they want to bring in the like kind of, what is his name? Like the Two-Gun Kid or something from like the cowboy era of Marvel, he could just be in the TVA and they can be like, all right, you're in the real world now. Like it's a perfect little hub for them to just bring in characters that don't make sense, which is also very exciting.
It's interesting that the TVA is also basically just building. Like it's just like a giant office. There's nothing. You never go outside it other than to
you saw the B movie
out
Hive.
Like there's that, but it's still still not like outside. It looks like it's a colony inside a giant office building. Which is kind of cool. So there's no like plants and interesting things outside. Well, there's no windows.
The theorized thing is that this may be and it's what has always lingered, is this may be the city that we see in Ant-Man and the Wasp. That Wasp is like, because she obviously has the line of time works differently here. It's a very tropey line, but it's the Marvel Universe if they want to kind of play with that. And obviously, we might as well talk about him as well. Kang, our end-all villain, will be in the next Ant-Man movie. So it's very possible that all kind of ties together with Quantum Realm and stuff like that. How did everyone feel about our, is it Jason Majors? Jonathan Majors, for his debut role as Kang. How did everyone feel? Because I'll say, I'm very confused. I think that he was really good for like the first 5 minutes, but then the things that I found really good, he just kept doing for the following 40 minutes. And the longer he was doing those things, the more I was like, okay, do a bit of a reveal. And I felt like all the dialogue he was given was the same idea constantly. Like, he managed to stand on a table twice. You shouldn't be able to do that. He couldn't even finish a fucking apple. That's how much he was talking. But for me, I like it in the very small thing of when we get big meanie Kang, it'll be nice to remember this funny little Kang that is so not the villain that we're about to experience.
He who remains.
Not Kang. He who remains. He said conqueror.
Yeah.
Someone called him a conqueror. But for me, it was a cool way to do it. It was obviously a safer version of something like the Mandarin. It's like, this isn't going to upset anyone because they basically flat out said there's another Kang coming. You saw the other Kang. He was not coming. But we will see the better version. Not a single smile. Fuck you guys.
I smile.
I saw your smile, Ben. It's fine. Audio listeners, the other two.
Will and I are just used to that kind of joke at our work.
Yeah. It comes in thick and fast.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, this is fine, but I felt like that whole sequence just didn't work for me because there was a lot of weird direction choices. Like there's a moment where I think when he realizes that he doesn't know what's going on anymore, the camera's been pushing into him, and then it does the exact same move by pulling out. And as it does that, I was expecting something to have changed. Like it felt like a moment of, Loki and Loki are gone. Like time is unraveled in front of him. But no, it's just pulled out, and then the scene continued as it already kind of had. There was never really, for me, any stakes with his character, which is fine because, again, we're going to get the one that has that. But a little underwhelmed with everything about the entire Kang section of this, apart from obviously the end of the episode. But who am I going to pick? I'm going to look at these faces. Who am I going to pick first? I'm going to give the floor to Ben first, because I feel like Ben has some thoughts. So we'll let that trickle.
I think Jonathan Majors is the best choice they could have made for this role.
Yeah.
I think you're right in that the writing in this episode does fail him a little bit, and he's kind of just floundering with what he's got. You can tell he's like trying to make it work. But I feel like even in just like the episode that we get him, you see his range just in that. And for a character like Kang, who is supposed to have all these different versions with varying levels of evilness, I think that's very exciting. Like, they got the casting right there, and so I'm keen to see future versions of him. I totally agree that this version of him was a bit interesting.
Actually, sorry, just quickly, it's just hit me that he really is the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, totally.
Like, he is the man behind the mirror that's just a little bit fucked in the head. Yeah. And it's like, how did this guy organize all of this?
Yeah.
So I guess they're playing the long con, which they did with the Wizard of Oz, with the Time Masters all being robots. I guess they did land on that, and I've only just made that connection here. Yeah. If you've watched or listened to any of these podcasts, that's usually where I realize things. You'll see a moment when my brain clicks into gear. So in that sense, well done.
Yeah. I think my main issue is that, like, it's a good conversation. I actually think the dialogue, some of it is written interestingly. I just think, again, they repeat it so many times within the episode. Like, they're just filling time, and I was glad for once that they didn't end the show with a big fight and that they actually tried to do something different. They didn't completely nail it. I think what would have been more interesting is having Miss Minutes play more of a role at the start of the episode, having that build-up be a bit better, and then revealing this kind of idiotic Kang, and they're just like, let's kill him, like, quickly. Yeah. Like, it's not this big debate over whether he's right or wrong. He, like, reveals that he knows everything that's going to happen, and they're like, how does this guy know? And, like, it just needs to be snappier. Or, I don't know. I
mean, that's a good point of, like, why were they questioning the man that runs the TVA knowing what's about to happen? Yeah. Like, why did we have to have a discussion of him, the device that we see from episode 1 and 2, which is, like, basically the temp pad? It's like, I know what he's doing. I know that he's teleporting around. We watched that at the start. Don't explain the temp pad to me again.
My summary for it is basically that I love the actor. I love what I think he's going to bring to the role. And I'm excited for the way he sets up all these different versions of himself and, like, talks about the multiverse splitting. He's got a lot of charisma and stuff, which feels perfect for Kang. I just a little bit disappointed by this iteration, but I guess the exciting thing is we get other ones. The other thing I was going to mention is I was watching a video recently by one of my favorite comics YouTubers, Comic Drake, where he did a video where he was like, Kang the Conqueror sucks and is the worst Marvel villain. And so I watched that before we got this reveal. And he made some really good points in it. So I'm really interested to see how they turn, because Kang's clearly their big bad now. I'm really interested to see how they actually turn him into a compelling villain, because he has some questionable things he does in the comics.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to you, Josh, speaking of comics, let's go to Sam, who doesn't have all of that as a background.
No.
How did you feel about everything with Kang in this episode?
Like, I obviously know of Kang, because, like, when you're into all this stuff, you hear a thing. Yeah, you can't avoid him. But other than that, I really don't know, like, what he's about, like, what his history within, like, the Marvel Universe is, or really, like, what he does. So I felt, Ben, like what you said, like, the actor was great. I didn't mind the fact that he was a bit, like, quirky. I kind of like that when I see that in characters. I feel like there's a bit of, like, an edge to them where, like, you really don't know
I liked it as well. I thought it was kind of like a sinister quirkiness, which I liked. I just think it went on for too long. That was my main issue.
No, 100%. Yeah. Because, like, there was a portion where I looked down and I was like, okay, we're almost halfway through this episode and they're just talking. I was like, nothing's happened yet. So that's when I knew we were in a bit of trouble. But for the most part, I thought it was really good. The two most interesting bits for me was when he was like, okay, from this point on, I don't know what's going to happen. And then when he sort of says, I'm way older than what I look, like just small things like that it's so little but tells you a lot about the character. I really enjoyed when he does go back on his history a little bit of like what he does and how he came to be. I wish it was more than just a still frame of some goo moving on the table.
It was very...
Oh, okay. It was very Man of Steel.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
I was like, I thought you'd love it, Sam.
No, like, well, because it was the thing where I was like, okay, that, like, you know, that does look like what they do in Man of Steel, so it's pretty cool. But with it being a TV budget, I can't help but wonder if this was in a film, could they have made it more interesting? Like in Man of Steel, have like sweeping shots around what he's talking about, a little bit more motion, or even like a flashback, like showing us like live action what they had done. So like there was that. But the one thing that, looking at this episode from the point of view of an audience member who doesn't really know anything about the comics, say they're just someone that's involved in like the MCU as a film franchise and now TV franchise, it's kind of like he doesn't actually say who he is. He doesn't say I'm Kang. He doesn't really give himself a label. So it's like I can't help but think, are there people out there that are still like, well, who is this guy?
My parents are watching it tonight, and they absolutely will be thinking that. Good. I just had a phone call with them, and I'm like, call me when you finish the episode. Questions.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, it was just a thing where, like, especially for TV, I think it's important to give some context as to what the audience is looking at. Because even for me, like, I was like, okay, he's Kang because he said the word, oh, you know, I'm this, I'm that. And yeah. And you hear that and you're like, okay, it's Kang. But for the people that don't know that, they're just like, this guy's just rambling on and hopping up and down on a table. Like, what?
Yeah.
Like, who is he?
What's actually happening?
I didn't know Kang the Conqueror, or I didn't know the casting news for Ant-Man and the Wasp 2, then I wouldn't have any idea who it was. And like, I was watching it with my partner, and like, I said when they revealed him, I was like, oh, it's Kang, because I knew it was Jonathan Majors. And then at the end, she was talking to me and she was like, are you sure that was Kang? And I was like, oh yeah, no, it definitely is. But it's like, that's kind of the problem, I guess, with it.
It's like in the same vein, because I've also got big like Master from Doctor Who energy from him as well. Like he felt like that kind of unhinged character. And it's like if you went... Well, it's like the shitty Doctor Who episode that was like partly set in Australia, where I think people vaguely knew that dude was going to be playing the Master. So when he turned up, the whole episode, everyone's just like, well, it's the Master, isn't it? Like, what are we doing? And then in the end, he calls himself the Spy Master. So we would never have known that it's the same character. Anyway, let's not talk about Doctor Who, or I may die. Josh, how did you feel about Kang in this final round?
I really liked him. I thought he was a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm super keen to see the future portrayals. There's probably going to be a bunch of Kangs, I would imagine, in the future. So it'll be really interesting to see how he plays them all differently and stuff. As you were talking, just before you mentioned Wizard of Oz, my mind jumped to Gene Wilder's Willy Wonka.
Oh yeah.
Just very like manic and like something kind of off and sinister about him, which that was Gene Wilder's freaking
totally.
Willy Wonka. Like that guy knew everything and knew nothing and was just like, it's
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was just insane. So yeah, I was getting a lot of those vibes, like I guess, which I only just realized that I was getting those vibes while we've been talking about it today.
Podcasts, it's the moment for opinions.
That's it, yeah. But I really dug him, super intrigued. I personally don't know, it didn't quite hit me that went on for like ages and ages and that he was doing the same thing. I don't know why, but I was just like, yeah, this guy, like, you know, it just seemed like he was really breaking. Like, he was like, I'm done with this, I'm done with this, I'm done with this. You guys need to take over. I'm getting to my freaking limits here.
Yeah, I did like that he was kind of playing with how long they took to make that freaking decision.
Yeah. So, I really dug it. I feel like I've never seen this guy in anything. I had no idea who he was.
Yeah. No.
I only I don't know. I probably heard that someone called Jonathan Majors was going to be Kang, and then I heard about it again this week and was like, I guess that's him.
Yeah.
When he turned up in the show, I'm like, okay, cool.
I'd seen a picture, so that was all I had to reference.
Yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
enough.
I think I just had like probably a Mr. Sunday Movies reference. Like they probably just popped up a picture of him, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, sweet. And then he popped up in the
That
show. I'm
dude.
like, there he is. I guess I'll see you in a couple of years for the next Ant-Man movie.
Well, the thing that I'm
yeah.
excited about with Kang is I'm like tepid on the idea that he's the next big bad.
Yeah.
I feel like he may be just he's the Ultron, but instead of Ultron popping up in a second Avengers movie, he's just going to be around for a bit, and then when we get an Avengers movie, that's when we get rid of Kang, because
Right.
Kang isn't quite like he's not
Yeah,
Thanos. He's not
or a
he-
Galactus
he's-
or
Yeah, totally. Like for me, I think, and I think a lot of people have kind of assumed, I think the next big bad's probably Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
Like that's probably where we're headed when we get the Fantastic Four and
I
stuff.
will say with Fantastic Four, it's interesting because I think Kang in the comics is actually like a great grandson of Reed.
He's a Reed, but he's also a great. There's a mix in there of Doctor Doom as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a bit of both, which is fun.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people have been like, so does that mean that Mr. Fantastic has to be black? And it's like, you know how genetics work? You know that if a man now had a child in it was like 3200, he said he was living in
Something
or
like
something.
that, yeah. Or 30,
It's-
like 31 or something. Yeah.
Something like that. It's like, look, somewhere in the genes it can happen. It's fine.
yeah.
Calm your farm.
Yeah.
Pretty much
If you
like,
want your white Fantastic Four, you'll probably get it. Just calm
Yeah.
down. It's
yeah,
okay.
if a white guy sleeps with a black woman,
Yeah,
like, that's it.
It doesn't
there it
doesn't
is.
take much in terms of the
Yeah.
gene pool. So just
No, not at all.
calm the fuck down. Also, you're a racist.
Yeah.
You're just a racist. You're not worried that Kang is black and that's gonna.
No.
You're just a racist.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
So for me, I think Kang will be interesting because he's been set up in one of the shows, it feels like they're more happy to play with him in the sense of he could be anywhere and he could pop up multiple times and you can kill him and knock him down and we won't get the big evil Kang for like 4 years.
I think the other cool thing about him, I guess I'm also tepid on him being the big bad. I did mention it earlier, but I could also see him just popping up in like everything, and it's a version of him. And like the idea I like that I hope they play with is that some of them might be like a better version of Kang. Like this guy is like, he's doing some messed up stuff, like multiversal genocide, I think they called it at various points.
Yeah.
But like, there's like a little bit of moral ambiguity there. So I hope they play with that side of things. And he's a bit more of like maybe anti-hero, or like in some occasions he kind of just pops up and is like, I'm going to help the Avengers because this threat is... He does that in the comics, actually. I was reading the big King in Black event that they had across the end of last year, start of this year, and Kang pops up in that with like Rocket and Spider-Man at one point. He's like, well, I need to help you here because otherwise I haven't got any timelines to jump through. So it's like...
yeah, that's a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the other element would be whether... And if they want Kang to be this recurring entity, the other version of Kang that may roll into the Young Avengers is Iron Lad.
Yeah.
Because Iron Lad is kind of one of the versions. He's the child Nathaniel Reed, who obviously grows up to be Kang and all the rest of it. And there's like a lot of interesting play in that of if you have a young Kang that can be part of that big Avengers movie that has a face-off. Like, there's a lot of interesting things they can do with Kang. But yeah, I feel like he's not where we're riding towards into the sunset. He's here to set up some stuff and let in some stuff, but I think the universe will move on without him before our next Endgame. But it's very exciting.
I found it interesting that he, like, his outfit sort of can, kind of resemble the comic Kang, but he doesn't really look like it. And a lot of what we get whenever we see bad guys, well, often when we see bad guys in Marvel movies, is they look like bad guys.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell they're bad guys, but he doesn't really.
Yeah.
And so, that's where his acting and the menacing kind of sinister feeling comes in. But it'll be interesting to see how we feel when we get like a comic accurate looking Kang outfit with his
we
TV
do.
and helmet and stuff?
Oh yeah, minus the helmet. But the statue at the end of the episode that we see of him is the outfit, like from
and
neck down.
they're gonna give us
look.
the comic book accurate one at some point as the fan service. Like we got it with Richard E. Grant in this and stuff. So it's gonna happen.
That's what I'm kind of thinking, because that looks like a villain. Like the helmet looks like a villain, but when it's just a guy,
a dude,
it's like okay, cool, whatever. But I feel like I'd be a lot more intimidated with the full helmet, like a cool version of the helmet. Like they did Mysterio, not in a corny way with the helmet.
Totally.
I feel like they can still do that with Kang, and he can be quite menacing and creepy, and maybe that will feel like more of a big bad.
I could see them
once we visually see
for that
him.
one doing some kind of funky mask like holotech that they do with like some of the TVA projections. I can see that being his version of the comic outfit, so it looks a bit more sinister.
That'd be cool.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As I said, I felt like opinions were going to be split. What I want to put out to this, because I feel like there's not too much to talk about as a series overview, but one element we haven't really touched on is the fact that there are multiple Lokis in this. So I want to put the call out, what is your favorite Loki in the show? So there's two possible answers, and if you answer either way, you're wrong. The correct answer is Alligator Loki. That's like an undisputable fact. If you disagree, you've clearly missed episode 5. But the real obvious answer is Richard E. Grant's Loki, who is the most phenomenal thing, and I just adored him. And it was one of those things where I'm like, I want more, but this also just did so much justice for what they wanted to do with that character.
Yeah.
That it then just made Tom Hiddleston's Loki look even worse. It's like, in the space of maybe 10 minutes of screen time, you took a character that was where Loki was basically at the start of this series, or should have been, having watched his life, downtrodden, depressed, having to live without his brother for the rest of his life. And by the end of the episode showed, Owen Wilson gave him some hope and was able to showcase his true potential. Meanwhile, our Loki goes from sad and depressed to sad and depressed, and then somewhere in the middle he's a little bit sad and depressed. And it's like, was this show called, well, I guess it was only called Loki, it wasn't called Tom Hiddleston, but I feel like, and I know I asked the question what your favorite Loki is, but there's no other options, I've already called him out. Can we agree that Tom Hiddleston got a little bit shafted in his own show here, like as a character? I don't know, I just feel like I enjoyed him, but I never enjoyed Loki. I enjoyed Tom Hiddleston's fun that he was having, but I never really felt like I was watching a show about Loki. I guess is my thinking.
There wasn't a whole lot of the Loki magic that we see, like him doing his projections and stuff.
They poke.
They
poke
how
fun
he
at
like
that
projects
even.
himself. Yeah,
and it's like, well, why did you just show us? Like, we know he's more powerful than this, and they're like, oh, you do realize you can project all this stuff, and like, well, yeah, we've kind of seen him do really powerful.
He was Captain America.
Like,
he didn't do anything cool like that. Like change him. Change himself all that much.
No, don't worry. He turned into some of a security guard, but he kept his own face. Why?
Insane.
But yeah, does anyone have another Loki they want to bring up? Josh, you hated a child, so I guess there's that.
Yeah.
Ben, actually, because Ben, you probably have some like readings of, I feel like, Kid Loki at some point, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know. Because I kind of liked him. I felt like he's going to do well when he's leading the fucking Young Avengers or whatever.
I think kid actors were always a troublesome thing. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to say they picked the right person, but he's Loki enough. Like the thing is, he shows up for like he has like maybe 10 lines. He doesn't have that many lines, but I already believe he is more of a Loki than Sylvie ever is. So it's like he does the job of being a Loki. The dynamic of him being a weird King Loki, I think I'm not super versed on it. I'm pretty sure it's a comics thing in like late 2000s or something. But he didn't really have any of that charisma to me. Like, he didn't feel like he was in charge of these people. But I also kind of liked that. I thought that was kind of funny that they were like, oh yeah, he's the king. We bow down to him, and we're like, why? Well, you don't know. You haven't been around.
Yeah.
You haven't seen what he's done.
He killed Thor somehow.
Yeah.
We'll never know.
Yeah. Shout out to Throg though. He better
Shout out to Throg.
he better be back.
100%.
He better be back.
I heard there was actually ideas. I think it was a Mr.
Shot.
Sunday Movies thing. Yeah,
Shot and made.
yeah, where Chris Hemsworth actually voiced Throg having a fight with a Loki or something.
I think we were basically
great.
going to see in the first episode Throg being pulled into custody like we saw that one dude.
Yeah.
That was kind of the situation, and that's why he was in that purged dimension, is he got purged.
It's so cool.
But they did confirm that and I feel like everyone heard it, that the little grunts inside that glass jar were Hemsworth. It's like they're fate, but you definitely knew that they were Hemsworth grunts.
I actually thought it was an Ant-Man at first when I first watched the episode, and then I saw someone, like, I was reading through some spoiler comments somewhere, and someone's like, oh my god, it was Throg, and I was like, oh god, now I have to go back as the number one Throg stan across all ETTO back pocket stuff. I had to go back and make sure it was, and it was.
I'm glad Ben has admitted to this, because I can now. I totally missed Throg. I saw the freaking Mjolnir,
Yeah.
and then I saw. I think my housemate. I watched nearly every episode with my housemate. That would be. It's the only thing that would get him away from Destiny, and he would be quiet for an hour. But yeah, he was like, "Oh, it's a Thor." I'm like, "What? Where? I totally missed it." And then when I jumped on our Discord, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Throg! It's Throg!" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Okay, sure. And then it started popping up online. I'm like, there he is. He's in the ground.
What an Easter egg episode.
He's-
the fact they snuck Thanos copter in there is incredible.
That was good.
So good.
He's if Throg is not in Love and Thunder, I'm going to be so disappointed. Like, seriously, you got to do it, surely. Especially with what Taika's been beefing up about how weird that film is. He's got to be in it, I'm convinced.
Well, now we have a bunch of Lokis and a bunch of Thors coming. That's kind of cool.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the thing is that film is the only one in the current slate that seemingly doesn't have a multiverse angle. Like, you've got Thors that belong in that universe, like assumedly Jane Foster Thor. There's precedent. You don't need to pull her from somewhere else. I feel like having a moment of Throg would be enough connective tissue to be like, this multiverse angle is continuing through all of our films.
That's where they're going to bring in Beta Ray as well. I think
Please.
I actually wanted to ask, please, Beta Ray is wonderful. I wanted to ask Will, actually, because I feel like what this means for the upcoming slate is that now that this has been the multiverse turn, that everything's going to have a little bit of multiverse seated in. Obviously, the next thing is What If, which we are now learning actually has like a plot of some sort, which is cool. But that means that, like, maybe not Shang-Chi, but I feel like maybe even Eternals, and I feel like this is what I would ask Will. This almost certainly confirms Spider-Man 3 has multiverse shenanigans in it.
It definitely does.
And I guess I want to know how Will feels about it, how everyone else, because, like, I think it's kind of exciting, but I think part of, like, the trepidation with Spider-Man for sure, and it could happen with other stuff, is does that get in the way of actually telling, like, finishing off the arcs? I guess for Thor it could be good because they're kind of starting a new arc, it seems. But, like, for Spider-Man, I am also worried that it'll definitely get in the way a bit.
Yeah. Like, I think Spider-Man is the only one that really will be hurt for it. Because Spider-Man, like, Far From Home set up such an interesting idea of Peter's identity being thrown out there. And I just would love to know if that was a plot point thrown in by Sony. And Marvel said, we don't want that. Like, you need to understand where we're going with our universe. We don't have time for that. And Sony just, like, pressed hard and we're like, we need this. And because it like, for everything we're seeing, it's like, there's no way that Feige was like, revealing Peter's identity will be important to where our universe is going. So it scares me, but I also feel like, it's almost like I'm going to have to just accept that thing is going to get abandoned straight away. I mean, we had to accept that Aunt May finding out his identity just got abandoned. Like, it seems maybe that is the reoccurring gag, bad idea of the new trilogy of Spider-Man movies, is that the end credit bit is instantly abandoned in the next film. So, it worries me. But yeah, the thing with the Eternals is interesting because obviously the line in the trailer is we haven't interfered until now.
Yeah.
Which people kind of were like, oh, something big has happened now. But now you can kind of tie that to the multiverse in that they haven't needed to. But now the universe is expanding and threats must be entering our timeline. That maybe is that what that line actually means.
I initially thought it was going to be like a kind of... they were going to come in the 5 years in between Infinity War and Endgame, and that was going to be the catalyst. But I'm pretty convinced now that it's going to be multiverse related. Also, because Eternals have ties to Thanos, like quite strong ties to Thanos. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some version of that pops in. Maybe not in the first one, but at some point. But yeah, I feel pretty strongly that, again, I don't know if Shang-Chi will have it. That's like the next one up, but definitely almost all the properties, TV shows, all that stuff after that will have some element tying in.
Hawkeye.
There'll
be 2 dogs, and one of them can talk. But also, What If is also an interesting one in that obviously when Sylvie bombed the timeline, everyone was like, oh, that's birthing What If, and everyone's like, that's fucking stupid. But now that it really does feel like that show is being tied still to the cinematic universe, it's like, well, maybe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe like these splintered realities actually are realities being birthed by the Loki show. And I think it's like, and this is not about the Loki show, but you're still here. It's the thing that disappoints me most about What If is that we haven't got Cumberbatch in there because it seems like it's going to be very tied to Doctor Strange, and obviously he's keeping the realm safe. But the one other voice that is absolutely in there is Hiddleston. So I would be very surprised if there isn't some TVA aspects as well in this, that maybe Hiddleston has to be voiced in this to kind of keep that through line. But yeah, it's interesting that What If seemed like such a fun side project, and post Loki it's like, oh shit, this is real.
And
I feel like at some point we will see Hayley Atwell in the cinematic universe with a shield.
The trailer they released 2 weeks ago almost, it's confirms it as well with some of the lines that are in it. So
yeah, and
totally.
could this be the way that we get Michael B. Jordan as Black Panther?
Totally.
I hope so.
It's very possible.
Grab him from another universe and have him there. Maybe he's good in that universe, but they have a Black Panther, so he comes across, and
it's very
because
possible.
I will say, in this last episode of Loki, probably one of the bits that got me the most excited just for where the MCU is going is seeing that timeline, all the branches come off it. And then it's a branch will come off, but then off that branch, there'll be more smaller branches. I love that because it just shows you the scope of how serious this actually is. And speaking on Eternals, I had the same theory because you've got this version of Kang explain that he sort of brought this whole war over the multiverse to a halt and saved it all and has kept it at bay. But now that Sylvie's killed him, there's no one that knows how to properly control what's happening now. And Sylvie, I don't think, will care. So it would make perfect sense for the Eternals to come in and be like, okay, Thanos really wiped out everything, but now I think we need to step in.
Something's up here.
I'm wondering whether, because his last line, Kang's last line to Sylvie is, I'll see you soon.
Yeah.
And I kind of, part of me wonders whether he's just saying one of me will see you soon, or whether he will somehow he's got a way of cheating death somehow.
He spoke of reincarnation. So I wouldn't be surprised that,
So that's kind of cool. Even though they've killed him, that version, we will probably see him again.
What if it's a bloody Palpatine and Rise of Skywalker, and he just put his essence inside of her?
Or in the apple.
In the apple. Yeah, the start of next season, she takes a bite and then just turns into Jonathan Majors. It's like, what the fuck?
Just on Sam's note about the timelines branching off, I also thought it was really cool. I got Webs of Spider-Verse vibes from it, that kind of imagery, but obviously not specifically Spider-Man related on this occasion, but every time I see something like that in the comics, I'm like, that is so cool. And I'm glad in the last episode that was a bit hit or miss, I think I largely liked it, but was a bit hit or miss. That was by far and away the bit that was almost gave me chills in terms of oh, this is really cool. I can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah.
It also seems to be the reason why comic books then have their giant events where they have to destroy all the universes and bring it back together, because it gets way too complicated.
Yeah,
DC's
we're getting Secret
New
Wars
52 and
in like
Secret
5
Wars
years or
eventually,
something.
just to
Yep.
cut it all down and then bring all those people into one universe, and then it'll happen again.
Yeah.
Yep. That'll be it. But speaking of the branching timelines and stuff, just quickly, I just need to gauge what everyone felt about the opening of the episode and what they did to the Marvel Studios intro, because I almost threw up from just feeling so like just nauseated by just and it was nauseating. It was also terribly done, because it wasn't like these cool phasing voices. It was just a bunch of clips of different characters thrown on a timeline that like just played while Cap's fucking ballad was playing as well, which was really bizarre. Like, I just had like the thing I felt was like, don't you dare ever play this again. I was like, if this is what you think is cool, I'm done. I'm out, Marvel. If you think this is a cool thing to play for the next 10 years, I just need to know, did anyone else just get like a shock and like a little bit of a recoil from that?
Like, I was a bit shocked, but for the most part, I thought it was okay. Like, at the beginning portion, when it's like you can clearly hear like the lines being said, and it was like nice and neat in a way, I thought that was fine. But then, as it did pick up and got more intense, it was just like, imagine all of us talking at the same time at once in this podcast. It'd be chaos.
Yeah.
So,
3, 2, 1.
yeah.
Everyone
3, 2, 1,
say
yes,
it.
everyone
So it's
like
like really
everyone just
horrible.
talks about
So it was
what
basically
happened.
like-
Yeah.
Apparently,
So, yeah, that was
Kylie
basically what the intro was. And like, Sylvie, who the hell is she? She's got no right being here.
I'm made of
Yeah.
rocks.
Yeah.
And now we've all got to start saying different quotes from stuff. I'm Star-Lord, man.
can't do
All right,
that.
fuck you, lot.
I can do this all day.
Think of quotes.
Thank you. Greta Thunberg, she was in there.
You can do it,
Apparently,
Ray.
Greta made it.
I was saying apparently Kylie Minogue. There's a line from Kylie Minogue in there, which is
Really?
I
bizarre
should be
choice.
so lucky. I should be so lucky. Just starts
Wow.
playing at one section of it. I'm like, how? How did we get there?
I kind of like what they did with the logo for a bit, like where I was like, oh, cool, they're trying to be unsettling and like this is uncomfortable. It went on a bit too long, got a bit too loud. And then I'm sorry, that zoomed through the fucking timeline with Marvel quotes interlaid with like really important civil rights moments. My partner pointed it out, and initially I was like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but every time I think about it more, I'm like, this is very reductive. Marvel is not as important as freaking Martin Luther King and Malcolm X talking.
I'm glad that everyone got to re-experience what that intro felt like for me and all of us.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any like final thoughts on the show? I feel like we've talked a lot about all the little elements. I'm leaving the floor open, Ben.
I'm just trying to think.
Felt very pointed.
Yeah. Well, no, this is nice. This is a nice like other side to what we just did.
Yeah.
Just
pretty
nice
much.
silence.
I will say one thing, like when we were talking about all the different versions of Lokis that we saw throughout this series, there was a thing, I'm pretty sure I mentioned it to you, Will, like before this series started. I wanted this series to give me a new appreciation of Loki, because in the MCU, I didn't really understand the hype, because I was just getting annoyed that this guy would always come back, die, and then come back, because I felt like that previous death then didn't matter. So I did want to get a new appreciation of the character, but then as soon as you get, you know, one of the best English actors in a classic Loki costume, it just ruins it.
Yeah.
Because he then...
I want that.
Yeah, I want that. Like, where's that been for the last 10 years? Because it was a thing where, like, what he did with Loki and, like, seeing how powerful that character could be, it's like, if they had done that in the MCU way earlier on, then I probably would have liked the character a bit more. But showing me that, I was like, well, now I hate this other one even more, because it's like, you're shit.
Yeah. The only like guiding or like hopeful thing is I feel like maybe that, and I mean the show kind of leans on it a little bit. That is like, that's where they want Hiddleston to get one day.
Yeah.
Because obviously Sylvie and him have that little line of like, she's like, how can you do that? And he's like, I think we actually have that in us. And
Which,
so I
like,
guess
if
the
they
show
do,
wants us to
great.
get there. Yeah, totally. But yeah, 100% agreed. It was unfortunate. I mean, okay, actually, before we wrap, we should briefly talk about where the show leaves, which is that Hiddleston's come back to the reality, but it's not the reality that he left. Sam?
No, well, I'm hoping that you guys can shed some light on this for me, because from what I understood from this series, the TVA existed outside of like any timeline, any universe or whatever. So when he comes back to the TVA, like, what's happened there? Because surely a different timeline shouldn't be affecting them.
Well, there's that, the fact that they didn't know him. The biggest thing is that the TVA, like, the TVA has taken in thousands of Lokis. Yeah. They know what Tom Hiddleston looks like.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if time had changed, what this actually means is Loki doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Like, Loki is not in any timeline. So that's one of the other huge things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was with you, Sam, as well. I was like, how does this actually work in terms of, like, what has changed here? Do you guys have any thoughts?
I don't think I'd really thought about the fact that the TVA is outside a timeline. I was just like, oh, it's another universe's TVA. But that's not how
There's
that
no
works.
other
that's
universe.
not how the TVA works. I hadn't really thought about it before. I do have something else unrelated to come back to.
All right.
So we'll come back to that. I just wanted
Do you want to write it down, Josh?
I might do that,
yeah. Good.
I'll drop my thoughts in real quick. I think the Wikipedia thing that is on Wikipedia for the description of the episode is like, it's a different universe as TVA, but you guys were right. That makes no sense.
That doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
I think how I initially read it and what I think they're going for is all the Kangs, or like all the timelines being released from their lock and like breaking the sacred timeline. I guess there's two ways it goes. One way is that there is the sacred timeline. That was the one TVA, which they were trying to keep just one TVA, and there is actually more, but they were trying to keep it locked in, and so that's why there's only one. Or alternatively, just that it caused so much chaos that the TVA itself like physically changed because the timeline, like all the timelines itself were just so drastic that when he got back to the TVA, everything was different.
Couldn't remain.
Yeah.
Well, because he does explain, like, when they're in his little, like, really, really dark castle, he does say the thing where he made the TVA after he saved the timeline. So could it just be a thing where, like, because this event has never really happened before to this extent, it's a case where it's affected the TVA in a way that they've just never expected it to. And, like, maybe it has had an effect. But the one thing I will say is that, if anything, like, I think it would have been cool because, like, our Loki gets, like, sent to the TVA, and then Sylvie kills Kang. And then he sort of says, like, you have two choices, like, you kill me now and then become the new, like, owners of the timeline or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember exactly. But I think it would have been even more interesting if when Loki went back, instead of a statue of Kang, it's just, like, a statue of Sylvie. Because she's technically now in Kang's place. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It was all just a bit too. I was like by the end of it, after everything that had happened, I was like, there's been an apple, there's been a kiss.
It's just
it was a lot.
Very ambiguous, and like I think I kind of agree with Sam when like I'm kind of just like I would never bought into the Loki hype in the MCU. I thought Tom Hiddleston was a good actor, but I never thought Loki actually was like as amazing as everyone talked about. And I always thought this show was kind of going to be fan service. And when we got the TVA, I was like, oh, maybe it's not. It kind of evolved into it. But I'm not a fan of them constantly rehashing character development and like his character interactions with people and having to do that all over again. And so when I saw that Mobius had forgotten who he was, I was like, are you serious? Like, I don't have to Loki to have, like, I don't. Part of the big problem a lot of people had with the first episode was that they were just telling us stuff that we've watched. And like, I don't want to have to them to have to go through those conversations again.
They know exactly what there's not going to be a previously on. The show's going to start season 2. The show's going to start. Mobius is going to be like, "Who are you? What's happening?" Loki's going to go, "Come with me. I'll show you something," and just connects the computer to his head. And just gives him season 1. And that fills in the audience like it filled in the audience about Loki in this season.
Yeah, and they'll spend a whole episode on it, and it'll be a waste of 1 out of 6.
we still won't get him on a
100%.
jet ski.
Nah, that's never. They're never gonna. They're gonna tease us with that forever. I like. Yeah. Like, we can't go down the jet ski route, or
We
I'm
really
gonna punch
can't.
someone.
Yeah.
And I can't even punch anyone because we're all stuck in our own houses.
We are.
So
It's all right.
Happy
Sam,
lockdown, boys.
happy lockdown. Sam's done a good edit of it though. So
Oh, thank you very
go
much,
check
mate.
out
I
his
appreciate it.
Instagram.
Thank you.
I haven't
Thanks,
seen
mate.
that.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that one,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah.
You literally showed it on stream last
I
night.
showed it on Thursday night. I did. All right. Now, before we officially wrap, Joshua, what did you
Yes.
write down?
I wrote down, I think I would have remembered this. I was running through it in my head for most,
Yeah, good.
the last 10 minutes. So I'm like, don't forget,
Yeah.
don't forget, because you will. But I found it really interesting that we have all these different Lokis. But the one that I feel like Will, Ben, and I were kind of really looking forward to seeing where this goes is vote for Loki, President Loki. Is actually another Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only
Yeah.
time we see like another actual Tom Hiddleston as Loki,
We
all the other
recorded a
Lokis
whole
are
freaking
different.
podcast on it.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
and like
Sam and I spent
it's so
money.
strange that they chose to have like another Tom Hiddleston Loki when that basically wasn't in.
It wasn't important at all.
Wasn't in any of it, and it was an interesting way to throw us off in the trailers because you see him, you're like, oh, how did that happen? Like when does he become president? But then
matter.
they chuck it in and it's like, that's not your Loki.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh,
I adored that. I adored that as a moment because as much as it is sad that, Sam and I bought all the issues and
Yeah.
we're like clutching onto them and like, we're going to be so rich. It was a beautiful, that is actually probably my favorite sequence in the whole show is the Loki sitting around and then Loki trying to exit, President Loki coming down.
Yeah.
The song, the piece of music that's playing as they're all fighting is so good. And just like,
The timing, the timing
Yeah,
of
go,
the
sorry.
alligator biting off the arm as well.
so
Comedically, it's just perfect.
Yeah.
So
and
good.
like his stilted reaction is perfect as
Yeah.
well. Just it's so panto, it's so fun.
yeah, so slapstick.
Yeah, but but amongst it all, and it's the proof of like Tom Hiddleston's fucking range is for the few lines he delivers. That's the real Loki. Like
Yeah,
that
totally.
is the maniacal
Yeah.
evil Loki that would have become, and because it's kind of what they're implying, would have become if he had taken over Earth in Avengers 1. Like that's what that Loki is. That's the Loki that became president of the planet. And like the shot of him looking over and stuff, it gave me and I talked to you about this, Sam. It gave me like Dark Doctor vibes when you've like had Doctor Who as a really good guy and then all of a sudden there's like the off-kilter evil version.
Yeah.
So as sad as it was that it was brief,
It was good.
It was amazing. It was exactly like Richard E. Grant's. It's like you knew how much to
Yeah,
give.
I think the reason that episode probably the best out of the series, I think in my opinion, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of people I think would agree. I think it's because all the stuff they do in it is timed perfectly, is given enough weight, nothing overstays its welcome, and they it's like paced the right amount is given to each Loki that needs to be. Like we get barely anything of boastful Loki, which is fine because we didn't need to. But I think that's definitely. I like that scene a lot as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's always one episode in these seasons where I'm like, I can't wait to watch that one
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Like, there's always that one, and it is because it's the most action packed. And I know that sounds like we don't like it being slow, but it's the fact that it's action paced and, like you say, incredibly well paced. I mean, thanks for bringing it up, Josh. We couldn't finish the podcast because of you. We were so close, and now we're here talking about not
Good on
the
you,
finale. But well worth talking about, and we'll talk about this whole thing. I think this is really fun. I think we've definitely gotten all of our grievances, all of our thoughts on whatever this season was. I think collectively, can we agree that season 2 will probably be amazing? Like I feel
hope
like
so.
I really hope so.
all the elements are now there,
feel like-
apart from Mobius.
Surely they've done all the setup they need to now.
Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, they're going to have at least 4 movies of setup
Yeah.
if they need to do anything else. If there's any more leg work, you can do it in a couple of the other films.
Do we think this is
I'd be
happening
interested to know-
middle next year?
That's what I was about
Yeah.
to say.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it'd
would
be
be
interesting to know whether this is yearly like Mando
Yeah, it could
seems
be
to
that.
be planned out to be and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
There's definitely no like news on that. The one thing that people are, like in just frothing and confused about is there's so many shots from the trailer that haven't turned up. There's shots of Loki on the throne which are just not here, and a lot of people the assumption is that those shots may have been in that moment of Miss Minute being like, here's all the things that you could have had. They were probably going to show those moments, but a lot of people are also wondering whether they have like sneakily maybe begun pre-production on a season, because like Mando, I think no one expected a second season of Mando this following year, so they could do a sneaky drop. The bigger question is, will Loki be in Doctor Strange? Probably, right? Loki's got to be in enough, but I guess and that would probably imply that a season would have to drop before the next Doctor Strange film.
I don't think it will be.
I don't know.
I think the concept of that is that the multiverse will already be established at that point. That's what they've done now, and it'll be Doctor Strange dealing with the messed up parts of it, aka Wanda.
It'll just be a sequence of, it'll be where the show finishes, a portal will open, you will see Benedict Cumberbatch's hand just stick through it with a middle finger and then go back in. And that will be the post-credit scene of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Just a middle finger. But cool. All right. We've definitely finished talking about Loki now.
Yeah.
Thanks, boys.
Thank you.
Worries.
This was good. We should do more everyone.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, this is
This was great.
I feel like it's good for like the series, maybe, to do these at the end where we all just get our thoughts together for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
that'd be
It's
awesome.
good. I was excited. I was talking to you, Sam. I was so excited to talk about this because I feel like we were all going to be in different places with this. And I think we still were, which was cool. It was cool that we were all kind of landed differently with this show.
Definitely.
But there was a middle line, so don't fucking listen to what I said at the start of the podcast. There is a middle ground. Will is incorrect. But if you want to see more of Will being incorrect, then you can stick around here. If you're listening to it, you're probably on a Spotify or a Chrome thing. We're on almost all the audio-based things. But if you want to see all these lovely white faces, you can head on over to youtube.com/each to their own. We post videos there when we remember to. And then we go live as well. Josh, where do we go live? And bear in mind, we haven't changed the URL at all yet. I saw your face got really excited. We haven't changed it. No. We didn't change it because I was going to message. I had to try and grab those other ones, remember?
That's right. All right. Yeah. For now, we are still at twitch.tv/ettonline, ETT online. We're on there pretty much every Monday. Will and Sam are on there
like fortnightly Wednesdays.
Fortnightly Wednesday now.
Yeah.
Things have slowed down a little bit for figures, so that's cool.
Only COVID cases, though.
With that, and then sporadically throughout the week as well, every now and again, whenever we get a chance, we'll usually jump on as well. So come follow, chuck on the little notification, and you'll get notified through your app or whatever. But also, if you want direct information from us about when we're about to stream or, when we're late to doing it, jump over to patreon.com/each their own and you can get onto our Discord. Just a couple of bucks. We'll get you in there. You can come chat to us. Come tell us what you thought of Loki. Tell us what you thought of any show, because we're just constantly watching and trying to review everything we can.
Except MODOK, because fuck MODOK. Where can people find you, Sam?
I enjoy MODOK.
You can find me on Instagram at Sam's Studio AU. I do a bunch of like Photoshop artwork there. I try to post out consistently, but if you want to go check that out, will be greatly appreciated. And Ben, I'm sure there's a place where they can find you, right?
Yes, you can find me at twitch.tv/ArgonTV. I'm actually working on, just started the other day, a bunch of rejigs of assets and getting some emotes done and stuff. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, every Tuesday night at the moment, hoping to up that, but we'll see how things go. We'll see with COVID and everything, But yeah, also Josh and I streams TBD on ETTO channels, where we're trying to work out a time that works for both of us, but we want to bring back some game making streams, so that'd be fun.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You'll get a couple of Thursdays, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Hopefully you feel 6 you won't, but we'll see. And if you want to support Ben and I in a medium well-paying job, you can jump over to Backpocket. Is it Backpocket GG or GG Backpocket?
Backpocket.gg. Patreon.com/backpocket. Backpocket vids on all the socials, which are the ones I do.
That's the one Ben cares about now.
And then Will does the YouTubes and the Twitches. So
yeah. So give us your money or your likes or your subs or whatever Ben cares about.
Just anything.
It'll help us. Yeah. And thanks for helping us by listening to this podcast as well. If you're listening to this on an Apple Music, give it a rating. I don't think I've ever checked if we have any ratings, but you can do that there. So why not? Amy, give us a rating.
How dangerous.
That's true, Sam. Mainly because don't you dare give us a bad rating, Samuel. I don't want to look at that thing and just see a big old downvote. But until the next time you see any of our faces, you can see them in all those places. I've been Will.
I have been Sam.
I have been Benjamin.
And I've been Joshua.
And I've been Will. Good night, Australia.